Welcome to Service and Wealth, the podcast dedicated to helping military personnel master their finances and achieve financial freedom. Our mission is to guide you through the ins and outs of planning, saving, and investing, and most importantly, how to balance savings so you can enjoy life now and retire with confidence. All right. Hey, welcome back. It's a special day here on the Service and Wealth podcast, not because of my guest. Okay, I'm kidding. It is special, especially for me, for the guest I'm about to introduce, but it's also special because we're recording it live on November 10th, the year 2025, which means today is the 250th birthday of the Marine Corps, the world's most elite fighting force ever. I've heard Navy SEALs kind of like tout their accomplishments, or like Delta and like some of these other guys, they even, they call themselves like tier 1 operators, but like nobody can even come close to the Marine Corps. And I think it's just as much the birthday ball that we have itself. Like nobody's ever gone to a SEAL's birthday ball. So to all the Marines out there tuning in, happy birthday, Marines. Semper Fi. I miss it. I gotta say that much. I hope you all are safe and doing well today. And with that said, let's just get into it because our guest today is a Marine. We've got Marine Gunnery Sergeant Chris Esparza, another one of my former colleagues through the Naval Academy and training young Marines in California and doing a whole bunch of cool stuff together. And so the reason why, Chris is on is because he's also getting close to retirement, and we're going to go into that a little bit. And, Chris he's married, he's got a family, he's got 2 daughters. One is, I believe she's just headed off to college, and the other's in high school. And so today we're going to talk about a lot of things, but I think we're going to get some really good content and perspectives from him on like balancing all this stuff, right? Like a lot of us in the audience, we might be thinking right now about just retirement, or we might be thinking about, starting a family and how much a kid is going to cost. And he's got all of this experience that he's going to be able to share with us. So without any further ado, he's coming live from... Where are you, Chris? Are you in Temecula right now? Is that right?
Pretty close. Murrieta. So 45 minutes from Camp Pendleton.
All right. Murrieta. So, welcome, Chris. That was a really short introduction by me. Is there anything else that you'd like to share, let the audience know about you and your career as a Marine, or who you are just as a person?
Not much. Good morning to everyone, to all the service members. Happy birthday to the Marines. Again, this is for everyone serving in the Department of War. I'm excited to be here. I've learned a lot, and I still got a lot of learning to do, but just on here to kind of share my knowledge and to gain more knowledge. So,
well, yeah, and really that's what it's all about. I think back to when I was a young officer, and there was a gunny who told me, he's like, sir, the only way that you can call today a success is if you teach somebody one thing and you learn one thing, and that's how we get better every day. And so that's really what the channel's all about. And so it's cool to hear you bring that and be ready to share your experiences. Now, I got to ask, did you have a birthday ball this weekend?
No, not yet. I have one here in the next 2 weeks. So usually, here in Camp Pendleton, there's just so many units that there's balls going from like October through pretty much like early December. So it's just still waiting.
So you guys have...
But you know what?
Yeah.
But it's kind of, this last one is kind of unfortunate just because my wife, 2 weeks ago, she departed to Alabama for OTS, which is, officer training school for the Air Force. She's a reservist, and, she did a direct commission, so we try to prolong that as long as we could, but, she finally left. So she's in Alabama right now, but she's having a good time. Little did I know is they have their phones on them, so I was like expecting OCS. I was expecting OCS, they were going to get, beat down. And no, she's like texting me and calling me. And I'm like, wait a minute. Are you, it's different, but hey, shout out to the Air Force as well.
Yeah, no, that's great. Well, congratulations, I guess, on the fact that she's following through with that. And also that she managed to kind of hide from it for so long,
Yeah.
just kind of but it is funny. I get things over here on social media feeds about the Royal Air Force, and they're the same kind of jokes that we make about the Air Force in the United States. They're like, hey, Air Force, your new medal is here, 14 consecutive days without air conditioning or something like that. So it's a universal joke.
No, yeah, they get.
Well, so she's making that transition, and then like, what's your countdown to your retirement date?
God willing, I'm looking at April. So a few months from now, no later than May. I'm looking at the full transition. With the leave days that I have that I have collected, and just the way that I'm planning everything. So hopefully here in April, I can start fully transitioning into the next chapter in life. But I'm honestly the last 3 years just trying to come up with the ideas of what I wanted to do, and a lot of them, kind of, it flipped. I really thought, you know, a few years ago, I was going to, kind of transition into keeping my foot in the door in the Marine Corps and going JROTC at a high school. I found what I loved to do was, being an instructor at the Naval Academy, mentoring, guiding, coaching, young men and women. So I thought I was going to do that in the high school level. But here in the last year, just change of heart, and I want to pursue, you know, entrepreneurship. I want to, small businesses, and just do something that I've never had the opportunity to do. Just continue to challenge myself, and the JROTC is a great gig, a great job, but you still have your foot in the door, and I think it was time for me just to completely detach from the Marine Corps. So I love it. I've loved what I've done in the past 19 and a half years. Is everything I've ever wanted to do since age 3. I mean, my father, he was a Marine. He was a reservist. I got his patch here, but he was an artilleryman.
Mhm.
Back in Los Angeles. During the Vietnam era, he went to Vietnam. I mean, from age 3, I remember my bed. On the side, I had those old school Marine Corps posters, and I knew the Marine Corps him at age 3. So finally, my dream is happened. But it's time to come to a close. But I'm super excited. And I feel like the stars are aligning for what's to come.
Well, I appreciate you sharing that because I think there's a lot of wisdom in that, which is you kind of get to go out on a high note. And, if you tried to stick around and maybe it wasn't like natural, you might not have the same kind of positive feelings about the experience, dragging on. And I feel like you see that a lot with some of the older contractors who get out and come straight back to work at like a MEF headquarters. And like after a few years, they're just like, this is not fun, and it can kind of ruin their memory of the Marine Corps. So yeah. And then also obviously I know you for several years now, and you've always had that entrepreneurial spirit. So the fact that you're pursuing that is also really neat. Before we get into that, I kind of wanted to go like, the classic Marine Corps-ism or planning-ism where you go big to small. So when you're looking at 6 to 8 to 10 months from now, what are sort of like the wave tops, like the big things on your mind, whether that's like questions you're trying to ask or like stresses you have?
Man, that's a great question. I would say, it is, for me, is there anything that is really, that I'm nervous about, that I still have, questions regarding? I'm still going through the retirement process, so that's
Mhm.
complicated in itself, but at the end of the day, I know that it's going to get accomplished. The VA, whatever I'm entitled to, the VA, the medical, I still got to go to TRS. That's a 1 week course, transitioning out. Honestly, sir, I am confident, but again, it's just for the past year, it's just I've been really putting a lot of work into already prepping myself for the retirement. It's just one of those things that I'm just blessed, and the way that I speak, I always go back and tell like little stories, but I dropped out of high school in the 10th grade, troubled youth, with the law, which is kind of crazy because my father, he was LAPD, for 39 years.
Right.
Just he was in Los Angeles. I was in Idaho. We moved, my mom. So, I didn't have the father figure there present, so that's why I got in trouble with the law, dropped out, got my GED, but the one thing that I always wanted to be a Marine in some way, somehow, I slid under the crack, and I'm still here. I mean, thank the OIF, OEF era, right? Everyone, no one wanted to join.
Yeah.
And, I was one of the ones like, hey, I walked in the recruiter's office, it's leading up to where I am now. I don't know if I know it's blessed, but it's also been some luck. Aligning everything, looking forward to, the day where I do officially retire, which is August, right? August of 2026, because I came in August. So yes,
Mhm.
I plan on getting out April, May, but my time officially starts in August. So I still got those few months of buffer, of getting paid and for everything to kind of catch up to that time. But it's a good feeling, the reassurance knowing that I really don't need to focus and dread and being impatient for that income to hit, right? Just based on the choices that I have made leading up to this. So, but right now, I mean, I would say the big stressor is still, doing the whole on the outside of the Marine Corps. There's no big concern, but in the Marine Corps, it's still the transitioning process of the paperwork and everything that I got to do.
Right, right. And there are a couple of decisions that it seems really strange, but you get to make that decision up until the day that you get your DD 214, and then like as soon as they give you that paperwork, you don't get to make the decision. Even though it's the one example I'm thinking of is like the thrift savings plan. There's certain things that shut off from the day
That is,
prior
yeah.
to the day after. So we'll definitely come back to talk about thrift savings plan. I know we'll talk about that a bit today, but I'm also curious for you talked there a couple times. You said, having this buffer and not like kind of stressing. And so, I'm aware of some of the investments that you've made over the years with real estate and other things. Do you want to share some of those investments you have and talk about how those are going to help you with the transition and help you with your retirement planning and all that?
No, absolutely. To a lot of the service members, to my Marines especially, I always tell them, before anything, your biggest investment, and this is my opinion, but your biggest, and I'm looking at my wife right now, but your biggest investment is, your spouse, wherever she or he is. My wife has a great career, and she has a great mindset. I'm very impulsive at times. She's the one that kind of keeps me calm, cool. Hey, sleep on it, and sometimes she gets a little frustrated with my decisions, but my wife, she has real, we make a great team, and we've been each other's biggest investment, so I'm absolutely blessed with that. But, we have our primary home here in Marietta, and then we also have an investment property here that we bought back in 2011. And,
Mhm.
it has been a rental for the past, I would say, 14 years. So we bought it back when it was 210,000. Now that house is worth like 700. So it's just a big blessing. When we're talking about passive income, I mean it's been huge. Just maintain. We manage that property ourselves. It's 5 minutes down the road from us, so it's very manageable. And then our second rental property is actually in our hometown of Nampa, Idaho. We bought that home back in 2018, for I believe it was like 252,000. Now it's like anywhere in the 4 to 450 range, and we've been renting that one now since 2020. There's never been a time where it's been vacant for more than 2 weeks. And that one, we do have property managers, but when I retired, that's something that we've talked about is doing it ourselves. Because now that we have a little bit of experience, I think we can manage. So just with those two homes, it's been very helpful, with a little bit more comfort. And then you can go, we've also made mistakes. One of my biggest mistakes, and this I will blame it on my wife, and she knows it. It took her
Okay. All
three
right.
years to finally it took her 3 years to finally say, hey, I was wrong. But one of the biggest mistakes was not buying a house in Annapolis. When we showed up to Annapolis, it was 2020. We moved into base housing, and it was very tiny. We were cramped, and I found this beautiful home right there by the golf course in that neighborhood back there behind the Necks. Gorgeous home, for $430,000. We went to go look at it. I think I caught my wife at the wrong time, right after a long 12-hour shift at the hospital, and she just, she didn't like it. But man, I saw the value in that home. The location, just the rental market there. Being so close to the little clinic, the Next, the PX, the golf course, the academy, kind of on a 1 acre lot. Anyways, we put in an offer for 431. That was it. Really, just because my wife didn't want, her heart wasn't in it. So long story short, they sold the house for like $434,000. So we lost
Oh
that bid.
no.
That home now, that home now is $746,000. And I'm just like, man, it's that missed opportunity. But you know, those are the ones that I keep thinking about. But the ones that we have made, we just been blessed. Also, I got it into which is not really a retirement plan, but just holding on to my crypto, as long as I can. I don't need it. It's just there. So whenever I do wake up and decide to like, hey, today's the day, but I have like I've had it for 5 years. I plan on holding it for another 5 years there. But yeah, just little things here and there that, we've been kind of just getting ready, just it's a nice security to have.
Well, that's definitely true. And when you look back at these investments that you did make, whether it was the real estate 10 or 15 years ago or crypto a few years ago, when you bought these things, what was your plan? Were you like, we're going to have it for maybe a couple of years, or were you like, this is going to be an investment that we hold for 5, 10, 15 years?
The our first home, which holds a special place in our heart. We got orders to Okinawa, Japan. We bought the house in 2011. When we got orders, it was like 2015. When we left, it was 2016. So, the house jumped significant, in value. At that time, probably I think like $150,000. Me seeing that price, I told my wife, "Hey, let's sell it." I was young. I wasn't too familiar with the whole, property managers and, having a rental. So I was looking for the easy way out. Speaking to a lot of my buddies, they made that choice, where they saw that pig, that pot of gold, and they sold their home. They sold their condo down at Point Loma, back in 2015 and 16, and they absolutely regret it, But so that was I was like, hey, babe, let's sell this home. And she was the one that kind of was like, hey, time out. I love this home. We're going to rent it out, So that was it. Before we bought the home, we were living in Santa Ana in an apartment. It was pretty expensive, and, the commute was there. And I really knew nothing about the VA loan until one of my buddies told me about it. And honestly, I didn't really do any research. All I did was I contacted a real estate agent, and they're the ones that kind of, again, I was 22 years old. I was 22 years old when we bought our first home. At the time I was stationed at the School of Infantry as permanent personnel. So I was always busy, this is when I was in my prime. I was a, corporal, about to be a sergeant, I already had Iraq under my belt, Afghanistan. Now I'm SOI. I just got orders to DI schools. It was just I had no time to think of any investment. Everything I've done, so far, early in my career, it was just kind of just going with your gut instinct and just kind of a quick Google search and, people kind of helping me, it's been one of those things and that's how we got our first home, with the VA loan is I didn't know nothing until I was just following instructions from the real estate agent. I saw, his name is Marcel. I haven't, we lost contact, but I still remember the name, cause he helped me out tremendously. But I remember being in the 7-ton on the side of the road in Camp Pendleton, calling, for the VA eligibility letter, being on the phone for like an hour. I remember being on the phone for another hour with USAA trying to get that home loan. Just going through the box, right? What to do. So that was the first one. The second one, my wife, she's a reservist. So the way that we bought hers was through her VA entitlement. And the thought process for that one is during that time, we didn't know if we were going to retire in California or Idaho, right? Our heart was kind of in both places. We were split, but we decided to buy a home there and just to hold it and see what would happen. Fast forward from the year that we bought it back in 2018 to now, that was a great decision. But at the time, I was kind of nervous because that home that we bought in Idaho 4 years prior would have been 150,000. We bought it for 252. So, but again, just look at that time, we were just looking at our entitlements. And at that point, we're thinking about the bigger picture, and that's the reason why we bought that. And then, when it came to crypto, I was in stocks for a few years, for like 2 years. I was heavy in Disney, Ford, and Alibaba. And, pretty much at that time, that was pretty much my savings. I pulled everything out and I invested into the stock market, and I was doing pretty well. Alibaba, it shot up to like I remember, 300 and something dollars a share. I bought it at like $160. I had a bunch of shares. Disney, I bought it at like 100. It was at its peak, like at $202. Ford, I mean, it got up to $26. I bought at the time, it was like $3. And again, I was trying to stick it out for the long term. In my head, I'm like, oh, Alibaba's going to surpass Amazon. I'm looking at Amazon price, and I'm comparing Ford to Toyota. It's like $40 a share. And I'm just like, man, I'm going to hold off, which was a biggest mistake, right? I kind of held off. And then that's when the market started kind of like, coming down a little bit. I still sold at a profitable margin, but that was my story. So when I started dropping, I pulled it all out. It was one of those, I've been looking at Bitcoin for years. I just didn't understand it. And in one night, I just said, hey, this might be the future. I was looking at, I had a dollar bill and I looked at it and it's like, a very old, crumpled, it's probably been circulated through thousands of people. And I'm like, man, how long is this bill going to last? How long is it going to last like this? People exchanging currency. I went all in, everything that I sold from the stock market. And I even went back into our savings account and I pulled it all. And then, I bought Bitcoin. That I really had no idea really what, it was just that gut feeling, that instinct of like, hey, I believe in what the future might hold, right? Like this is going to be the internet's gold. And I remember a year and a half later, 2 years later, Bitcoin went down to, I bought at 42,000. I remember I saw Bitcoin drop to $17,000, and I looked at my wife and I was like, I think I made the biggest mistake probably ever, but again, I stayed strong. I didn't panic. I knew I had a plan of holding it for 10 years. So I didn't even look at it for years. I didn't look at it. I put it to the side and I saw it come back up and I'm like, all right, I'm back where I started. No big deal. And then, last year I was on deployment. I was on the USS Boxer, and I got on the internet real quick, and I saw that Bitcoin jumped to like 57,000. I'm like, wow, cool. I made $10,000 in the last what was it, 5 years, and then from there it just it happened in a matter of like 3 weeks. 57, 64, 72. At this point, my heart's kind of racing, and I'm like, wow. And then when it's in the 80s and 90s, I was like, what? I remember just going on the top of the ship, and I was just like looking at the ocean, kind of with my hands up, like, I did it. I'm the smartest man alive. Um, and so and it's more like a hobby. I really, again, to me, I look at Bitcoin as make believe money. A lot of people call it that, but I know my investment, but the reason I call it make believe is because I really don't need that money. That money is there. I don't touch it. If I lose it, that is on me. Right? But I believe in that. I trust in it. So whenever that time comes where I need to pull that out or invest it in somewhere else, into potentially my future business, if the time comes, is there. I when I
Yeah.
saw it go up to 100, I saw it go to 126,000. I was like, man, there's no stopping it. And then it came back down to 98. I went on Facebook and I told everyone, I'm like, hey, Bitcoin's on sale. And now it's at 106,000. So it's just watching the market. But yeah, my
Yeah.
investments have started kind of not knowing. But everything just kind of came about, the right way. I know it doesn't happen like that to a lot of people when they invest, but now I kind of see the bigger picture, and I'm looking at my different pots, here and there, but it's been pretty blessed.
Well, I certainly agree with that, and you could probably give yourself a little bit of a pat on the back for having some good instincts and trusting yourself, which is, it's not all luck, right? There are people who are going to be on the luck. They might not have that vision of the long term. They might not have had the ability to say what really importantly at the end you did, which is like, I don't need this money, and that's, I think one of the big mistakes young investors make is they will take a little bit too much, invest it, and maybe they don't have like an emergency savings fund. And so then suddenly when something comes up that they need, 5 or 10,000 for like refixing a car or getting a new car, they've got to sell those investments. And if you don't have that mindset you just talked about, which is I'm putting this money away and I'm not going to touch it for 10 years. I mean, look at what your houses did, right? Or even, Bitcoin just in the last, I guess what has been maybe like 18,
A
24
year,
months
yeah.
that tripled in price. But if you had to sell it because you didn't have that cash available or just a full plan, you're talking about real estate, crypto, stocks, etc. you're going to miss out on all those opportunities. And so the one thing, I wanted to add with that to something else that you said about being, Corporal Esparza sitting in the 7-ton and being on the phone and like figuring it out, and how much it's like, we're not here to hold all of the young service members' hands and say, click this button, tap this link, like this is how you do it. The whole point is to kind of give this experience that you and I have now, where we're like, look at what happened when we invested in real estate, we invested in other assets, and then we held on to it, for 10, 15 years. Like you and your wife are millionaires because of the investments you made, and you still had to figure it out, so it's like, I think that's the main lesson I would take, and hope that everybody listening is kind of keying in on right now is, you don't have to get the little things right. You're going to have to learn by doing, and you make some small mistakes. But if you have the big plan and that big picture in your mind, then you're going to be all right. And you're going to look back 10 years from now and be like, I can't believe, look at what I've created. Maybe they'll be standing on the deck of the Boxer in 10 years, right where you were, and celebrating their own gains.
Yeah. I remember my first deployment, it was 2007 in Ramadi, Iraq. But I drove this major around, Major Durden. He was a lawyer. He was a JAG. And our job was civil affairs. We would go to different FOBs and, talk to the local Iraqis and pretty much pay out for damages that we caused, right? We took over someone's home to, make it into a little FOB, or, we destroyed someone's house, or, we ran over someone's sheep. So we would go and talk and, give money out. But I remember at the time he told me, he's like, hey, invest in Marble. And, he kind of gave me instructions, to go on Robinhood and, create an account, invest in Marble. And this is in 2007. This is before a lot of these Spider-Man and all these movies,
Yeah.
And
before smartphones,
I tried
and everything.
But I was 19 years old, and I really did not know how to do it. I tried, and it was like one of those things where, again, this is before I was married. My mom did my taxes until I was like 20 years old, right? So I just didn't know how to do it. And I look back at that, and I'm like, man, can you imagine if I would have invested my deployment money into more? What happened a few years later? Disney bought out Marvel, and just that's the stories wrote. I mean, if you could look at Disney and what they've done with that brand is crazy, So like, I think sometimes too, young service members, they get lazy and they just don't see the bigger picture, and they forget about it, and they just go with the moment, If I could tell you, instead of investing in Marvel, I went back home and I dropped $8,000 to getting my truck painted, lifted, wheels, and everything. I still got that damn truck, right? But I mean, yeah, it's dumb. Even this last deployment, XRP was at 50 cents. 50 cents. I had a room, the berthing, full of Marines, and I told them, right now is the time to get into XRP. I told them, I'm like, back in 2018, I had a friend who told me to get into it at like 18 cents. And I didn't, I just couldn't, I just didn't do it, and I'm like, man, can you imagine if I would have done that? But I told my Marines, get into XRP. Do this, right? There's Coinbase, there's Crypto.com, there's Uphold, a bunch of them. Get into it. And I would preach it. Nothing, not one of them invested, and then, we're in Guam, they're out there, buying, Jordans and watches, all kinds of stuff, And then, XRP got up to like $3 and what, 30, 40 cents? And then I'm telling my Marines, do you remember that time we were in the Pacific and XRP was 50 cents? It is now at 340. Like, if you would have invested this, you would be at this, And, sometimes just young Marines, they just don't. I wish I can just like tap them on the head to like really start thinking about the future, because it does come quick, and it is getting very expensive out there. I go grocery shopping. I really don't pay attention to, what are you going to do? You got to buy groceries,
right.
But
Gotta eat.
it is expensive. There's not a time where I go to a gas station and I don't care about the price. I have to fill up, But yesterday I was looking at the price and I'm like, wow, $4.58. That's a lot of money. There's, for me, there's never really, I don't think about it. I'm not affected by it too much. But I'm like, man, how are these younger kids, younger families, how are they getting by? Like, if they don't have multiple avenues of income coming in, you know? So, but yeah,
Yeah.
I try my best to go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna say the numbers don't lie. When you look at it, just during your career, my career, like over the past 2 decades, prices have gone up way faster than anybody's base pay has gone up. Than wages are going up. So you have to your point, you've got to come up with different ways to bring income into your life. And I don't think there's a lot of Marines out there or any member of any branch of the service who's got a lot of spare time. You know, we're in there for from 0530 to 1900 on an average day, and you go to the field and you deploy, and there's not time for another part-time or even full-time gig. So one of the quickest paths to getting that extra income is by buying assets, buying rental real estate. In your case, talking about buying crypto or stocks. And those are the kind
Yeah.
of things that you might not see it right away, but 5, 10, 20 years down the line, they're going to change your life. When we look at it, though, like your experience with those Marines on ship, it's the same experience that everybody has, in our position right now, where we're like, hey, look, we've learned all these lessons. I'm trying to share that wisdom with you, and you just get the blank stares back. What do you think is like an effective way to communicate it? And I was thinking about it, like, sorry, there's a little bit of an aside, but I was thinking about the birthday ball, and when I woke up this morning, there was like a soft bugling sound in my ear of like the Marine Corps hymn. And my whole time in uniform, the Marine Corps was just like a pain about the birthday ball. Like you're working hard, and all of a sudden there's like a sergeant major, like right here, like it's, like you're at recruit training again. And he's like, did you buy your ball ticket yet? And there's, you're like, can you chill out, man? Like, it's not fun when you're just hassling me all the time to go to the birthday ball, but then like you go and you have fun, right? It's like, as Marines, we're kind of programmed to be like, get out of my face, don't tell me what to do. I'm going to obey your orders immediately, but come on, man. And so I feel like that's the same thing with investing. Is it's just in like, we're all type A people in the military. It's just in our personality to be like, you can't tell me what to do. I'll figure it out myself. And yet, especially in investing, if you take 10 or 15 years to actually figure that out, you're leaving hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars of wealth on the table, and it's getting to be too late. So like, how do we get around that, where we're just saying like, you got to invest and start now and trust us as the older version of you? Like, I guess what another way to ask that is like, when you were at least kind of open to it when you were a 19-year-old driving around a Humvee, but like, think about your buddies, who are there with you, are probably like not even thinking about it. Like, how do we kind of like communicate it?
You know what? But going back to that story on ship, but I did have Marines who would come and talk to me on the side and be like, hey, Gunny, how do I do this? How do I buy a house? I'm getting orders to Paris Island, to Beaufort, I'm looking at a house. What do you advise? I did have that a lot. And I would sit with them on the computer and kind of go through Zillow and kind of go over the need and want. How big's your family? What do you absolutely need? And what is a want? A want is like a pool in the backyard. A want is like a 3-car garage. But like a need, do you need a 4-bedroom? Do you need a a 2-bath? Do you need like a special needs access? Whatever it is. From there, just kind of making them see, okay, I know that the banks will always tell you, real estate agents will always tell you, to go high and do this, but I'm like, let's look at the market and kind of go based on, how you can get a home where in 10 years, you're getting more back in return, where it is valued more. Is a brand new home nice? Absolutely. But what if you were to buy one a little bit further away, add 15 minutes to your commute, but let's say a home that's 20, 30 years old that needs a little bit of work, right? But is almost 25% less, but now you kind of, with 10 years of being inside the home, or even 4 years, and kind of, making it a little nicer with, a little bit of remodeling, could that home be worth more in 10 years than a brand new home, a cookie cutter home? Looking at, not even, what areas do you want to live in, right? Let's look at the school district there. Let's look at rentals, like what are homes going for rental? So when you leave there in 4 years, let's see if it makes sense to buy a brand new home for that high number, or what if But if you're kind of in the middle and you got a nice starter home that's a little older, but potentially you can rent that out and still kind of come off even, or maybe make a few $100 here and there. So I did have, Marines, and I would sit them down. We were living it on computers, but we will actually go into like online and kind of looking into all of those things. I will bring them in, also kind of show them the numbers. And I think for a lot of Marines, they really don't believe it unless they see it on paper, and it's a lot of people, and once in a while, some of my very close Marines, I will show them like, hey, look at my portfolio. I wouldn't show them the number, but I will show them my portfolio. This is what I have. I will show them my homes. All right, hey, this is my home that I rent out. This is how much I bought it for. This is how much it's valued now. This is my mortgage, $1,346. This is how much I rent it for, $3,200. You do the math, right? I get that back every single month for not, for nothing. I mean, it's every month. I show my house in Idaho the same thing. This is what I bought it for. This is what I value. This is my $1,500 payment, and then this is my, for what I rented for, the $2,400. And I show them to start getting that wheel turning. Like, man, I need to start kind of seeing if I can use my entitlement, But that's, I think with a lot of the Marines is, like you said earlier, it's not dragging them by the hand. We're just, I think a lot of them, we're just so focused on mission, and I love the Marine Corps. I absolutely do. But I think it does a very a good job of sucking everything away into the mission, which is good. But at times we got to pause and really sit these Marines down and give them that knowledge. We'll try to do the wickets, right? The check in the box, like, oh, we give them a financial class. What financial class, to save money and, don't buy a car at a high interest rate, the Navy Marine Corps Relief Society. I mean, little things like that. Let's start thinking big. Because I wish I would have, had someone back in 2000 and when did I get back from Afghanistan? 10. I wish I had a mentor that at the time, how I did XRP to my Marines. I wish back in 2010 I had someone to tell me, hey Chris, there's this new crypto coming out and it's called Bitcoin. If you invest $100, you'll have thousands, because right now it's at 2 cents. Can you imagine? I mean, it just besides that major and yourself later in my career, I didn't have that.
But it's everything you're saying is like there's two really important lessons that we can take from that, and the first is when we just go around saying like, hey, you should save or plan for retirement, like, of course, nobody's going to listen to us because it's just kind of generic. And so we have to take those leadership lessons that we learn as officers, non-commissioned officers, and not just in the Marine Corps, but all the branches, that it's leadership by example. And, these young guys are all smart. Young men and women are all smart. And so if we can do that, a better job of like showing and actually giving the numbers, then that'll probably get their interest for sure. And then that's also when you're talking about the, man, I wish I had this. It reminded me of the first moment that I came up with like this concept to create the military wealth coach. I didn't know what it would be called. I didn't know how it was going to look, but it was back in 16 when I was at 2nd Tank Battalion. And when I took command there was a group of like 8 or 9 Marines who were all EASing. And the company first sergeant's approach had been like, you know what, you guys just sit in the office. And then anytime that the CO needs something, like you're going to be their clerk. And it's going to be a bullpen, because half the time you're going to run for top to go do maintenance stuff, or you make runs for me. And then the other half of the time you're going to be going to that transition readiness seminar. Right. And so he did them the courtesy of like pulling them out of the trenches and the day-to-day grind so they could focus on their transition. I've never seen that anyplace else. Like, it's always like, oh, you don't have time to go to TRS, like figure it out. But during that time, Corporal Black came back one day. It was Tuesday, so it was like the second day of their seminar. And he came back in, and I saw his cover just go flying across the room, and then something slamming. And I was like, oh, here we go. So I come out of my office. I'm like, hey, what's going on? What are we doing? And he's like, sir, can I speak freely? And I was like, yes. And he's like, what the bleep is going on with the Marine Corps? He's like, I am getting out right now. And I just got back from a whole course on how I can use the thrift savings plan and other benefits and savings deployment plan. I missed out on all that because nobody ever taught me. And here I am getting out, and it's too late. And I realized, just like you've just said, is we're full gas until the very end. And so that's a reason why this Service and Wealth podcast exists, why the blog exists, why the books exist, is that if we can get it into the hands of, the E1s, E2s when they're first coming in, and the O1s and the O2s, we catch them at the front and give them all that knowledge that the service is not going to take the time to train because it's so mission focused. But that's, that's what we're trying to do, at least.
No, yeah, 100%. We are so quick to look at their PFT scores and, it's proficiency, but it's the little things, like you said. I mean, it's more than just the Marine Corps, right? I mean, it's a person, it's an American, it's a human. I mean, there's more to that behind that cover and that uniform. Another one is, at the time, it was Captain Garcia. This was the year 2000. When did I go to DI school? 2013. So it's like 2014. I've been in the Marine Corps already 8 years. He pulled me to the side, not really to the side. Everyone was out there, but he looked at me. He's like, "Hey, where's your thrift savings plan at?" And I looked at him, and I'm like, "I don't know, the G fund, right?" He's like, "Have you moved it?" I'm like, "No." It's like, "How much are you investing?" Again, I had different priorities. I love cars. I've always bought cars, and I was like 1%. Like nothing. And when I was a young Marine, I was like, why would I invest into this? $300 a month, that's a lot of money. I would rather have that $300. I remember like a week later, he pulled me into his office and kind of had me log in. I mean, I had to get my password and all that, and when he showed me my return return of investment for like in the last 8 years, you're talking about like nothing, like $100,
Yeah.
And
maybe, right?
I was
maybe
like,
100.
Yeah, maybe. And I remember I was like, what have I done? And he told me, hey, where you're at right now, just go 100% on the S fund and bump that number up to 10%. And I did that. I went 100% on the S fund, 10% of my daily pay. So from a sergeant to where I'm at now, it's been the same, the 10%. And again, with every pay raise, with every rank, that 10% gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I don't even need it. When I pull up my LES, I see it. I'm like, yes, and when I get that, when I get that document from Thrift Savings Plan of what I have, I'm just like, man, why didn't I do this sooner?
Mm-hmm.
But you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised. This was maybe a year ago. We were all like our staff for my battery. We were talking about Thrift Savings Plan within the staff. There was 2 staff sergeants who were contributing 0 for the past like 10 years. And
Ouch.
so they're out there, and it comes to that. It's like, we just don't know. We get told, but then it gets thrown in the back burner, and we forget about it, And then there's others, and I would say the enlisted, we are affected a little bit more. I think officers, they have a lot more mentorship starting at a younger time in their career, where they're not as back as a lot of the enlisted. For instance, like my little brother, he's at the Naval Academy now on his 2nd year. He's already, I already got him investing in CASPA and looking at, certain things here and there. But yet, in the enlisted side, we need to do a better job of really within the check-in process is, asking them about their family, what are they doing, how are they living, what do they have, saved up, what is, what different incomes are coming in, because we just have to. If not, then, they're going to get out and, no one, hey, thank you for your service, and that's it. They need to get out at least with a little bit. And I think that's why the blended retirement system came in place. And that's one thing. 5%, they'll match that 5%, and getting them started early. But it's also trying to crack that shell, because a lot of them don't see, they just see that number of money, that amount of money getting taken out. They don't see that it's going to come back 10, 20 years, 30, 40 years down the road.
Right. They won't see it until they wish they could, and then it's too late.
Yep.
And that is, that's for the blended retirement system. It's one of the advantages is that the service automatically, or DFAS, I should say, automatically enrolls everyone at a 5% contribution every year. And so, if those staff sergeants had come in since 2018, which I doubt they have, that's probably a bit too fast to make it to E6, but like for the corporals out there,
it's doable.
I mean, maybe
it's
not.
Doable now.
It's doable. Yeah.
Yeah. Now,
but
it gets promoted pretty quick now.
That's wild, right? But then, if you're like a corporal, so let's say, or a sergeant, let's say you came in like 2020 or something like that, you're getting automatically enrolled, and you have to like physically turn in paperwork to your shop to like turn off that 5%. So it's almost like the military community, the Department of War was like, we gotta kind of make you do this. And the one thing I would like to point out is that the 5% service matching that you get into blended retirement, it doesn't kick in until after you've been in for 2 years. And some young service members use that as a reason to not save or not invest. They're like, well, I'm not going to get that 5%. But still, you've got to save for yourself, right? Like the matching 5% that you're eventually going to get, that's just like, the cherry on top of the sundae or the gravy on top. And what it really comes down to is saving whatever you can from day one. So and I think as we're talking about this, like it's a good opportunity to kind of like transition into a little more focused discussion on the thrift savings plan. Not sitting here asking you to disclose like balances or anything like that, but obviously you've been using the thrift savings plan. It is part of your retirement plan, but that's still like getting that money back. It's still another 20 plus years away for you. On the other hand, in the next 8-9 months before you actually do retire, there's probably some things that you have to decide what to do about it. So what are some of the questions that you've been considering or decisions that you're thinking that you might be making with your TSP between now and when you actually EAS and get your DD 214?
Yeah, it's good for the time that I've had it. I'm very proud. Man, lucky. That one I am lucky that is where it's at right now. And I believe my wife. So I'm still all in on the S fund. I never changed it. I just go big, go home kind of guy. My wife, she's in one of those life cycles. I think the 2030, the L 2030. And you can go into that one, it's kind of automatic. From what I understand from that one is it does it automatically based on, it goes heavy early in your career, but then it gets more conservative as about to exit. But, my question is, I'm still undecided if most likely I'm going to pull it out and transition it into like a 401. But, I got a contact of someone who also can take that money and invest it into other things. I've heard some people, they just leave it in there. The only thing is once you're retired, no more can you contribute. That's the only caveat when it comes to leaving it in the TSP is you can no longer contribute. So whatever you have, you can still hold it and it'll still accumulate over the years. It's just no longer do you feed it. But that's one of the things that right now I'm still undecided on what is the smartest thing to do, and what to do. Because again, me and my wife, we know we have this other pot of money here, right? And we're not going to touch it until we're in our 60s, right? But it is nice, right? What we have is comfortable, and whatever it grows into is there. I just don't know what is the best way of moving forward when I do retire.
Sure. Yeah. And that's good. So like you already hit on one of the key limitations. The thrift savings plan, just to kind of like make sure the audience fully understands, it's just the government and military version of a 401k, and those plans are employer sponsored. So obviously, once you no longer work for that employer, you can no longer contribute to that plan, and they're not going to make any matching contributions for you. But the money doesn't disappear. They can't, they get in big trouble, right? So like you said, you still have that money, and basically what you're saying is I can leave it invested, or maybe I take it with me. And a couple of things that we think are important to consider is the expense ratios on the funds that the thrift savings plan offers, like the C fund, the S fund. We could talk about the other funds, but those are the only two that actually like have great performance. The expense ratio is like 0.025 or 0.035, which is half or a tenth, maybe even 1/100th of the cost of the same kind of funds elsewhere. So it's super cheap. A way to think about that, obviously, is if you're getting a 10% return and you have to pay a 3% fee, which is actually kind of common, especially for companies that contract for the Department of Defense. Their 401ks, they have like 3%. You're actually only making 7%. So because it's so cheap, it's still going to give you great returns, and it's a good deal. And then obviously, another reason to keep it in there is that the C fund and the S fund are really good performers. And, why not? Because as you said, you're waiting 20 plus years until you're going to withdraw it. So if you want to have the most money in retirement, go after those big, 10, 20, 30% annual returns that you can get. And, don't stress out if there's a year where the market goes down, because it's going to bounce back. But we're still
right
so
away.
far from retirement. It's not like if you bought XRP and it crashes back down to $1, like now you're panicking and trying to figure out what you're doing, because XRP could be for like tomorrow. So
Yeah.
it's all the big long run. But there are some other things that are going to come up. So are you familiar with the K loan? Have you ever heard of that? So you can take a loan on any 401k of up to $50,000 or half the account value. So if you only have $50,000 in your TSP, the most you could borrow would be $25,000. But so long as you have at least $100,000, you can borrow $50,000. You can only start that loan when you're still in uniform on active duty. Like if, for example, you saw an investment in a small business that you wanted to acquire and you didn't have the cash, or maybe like another investment property, the TSP for anybody reaching the end of their time in service, they can go and get that $50,000 loan, so long as they do it before the DD-214. Because even if you kept all your money in it, got your DD-214, and then came back next Monday, and you're like, hey, I want to take out my loan right now, they're like, oh, sorry, you're no longer active duty. You can't do that. So that's one thing to consider.
What interest?
It's usually going to be, it'll be competitive, right? So it'll be like maybe prime plus 1%. So it might be right now, it might be like 5.25%. It's a 5-year amortization. So you got to pay it back fairly quickly. But if you're able to invest it in something that's going to give you a 10 or 15% return on investment that you couldn't have bought otherwise, it's still making you money. So that's one thing to consider. Another, you mentioned in there something about, I think you said convert it to a 401k or something to that effect. Do you remember saying that? Yeah.
Yeah, I did.
Do you want to explain a little bit more what you mean by that?
So from my understanding is pretty much I can pull it and then put it into, kind of into a, I won't say civilian, right? But into a traditional 401k. Or is that not doable?
So to have a 401k, you'd have to have one of two things. You would have to have your own LLC or a sole proprietorship or other company that has a Schedule C on your annual tax returns showing that it's an actual business and it has an employer identification number from the IRS. And if you have that, you can set up your own 401k and you can roll over the funds from your TSP into that.
Okay.
And that works for anybody, right? Like, so like, it doesn't matter if you have a job or you don't have a job. If you have a side hustle with an LLC, you could do that. To roll it over into a traditional 401, a regular 401k, you would have to have a job with an employer that offers one. So,
okay. Yeah. I mean, I do have, the IEN, like my own LLC for my business. So I could do it.
Yeah, you could create what's called a solo 401k, and then you find a bank. I'm not endorsed or like sponsored by this bank, but like I use Solera Bank out of Denver, Colorado, and they're awesome. And they are specially set up for people who have solo 401ks. And so you put your money in there and then you can manage it however you want, right? Which is pretty great. The other option that you have is, you've definitely heard of individual retirement accounts, right? An IRA.
Yep.
So you can also roll over into an IRA from the TSP. So that might be an option you want to consider, because if you don't have an employer and you don't want to like deal with the headaches of like creating your own 401k and managing it, which they're not a lot of headaches, but you could also roll it over into an IRA.
Okay.
Right. So, and then one other thing, just to make sure that we're on the same page, because you had said like a traditional, obviously you have Roth and you have traditional, and those are, you can do you can do conversions. Have you ever heard of conversion?
No, I have not.
Okay. So let me ask then, when you look at your thrift savings plan, is all of your money in a Roth TSP? Is it all in traditional TSP, or is it kind of mixed in between?
It's on the traditional.
It's all traditional? Okay. So this is actually a really good topic to talk about, right? Is the traditional money, when you hit retirement, it'll be taxed as ordinary income. So let's say you have $2 million in there and you want to take out $100,000 a year. In retirement, you have to report that to the IRS. They take down your standard deduction, and then you have to pay income tax on the rest of it. And so it can get pretty expensive. Like we're talking $15,000 or $20,000 a year in income tax on that amount. Now, what you can do, before that pot of money gets to be too much is you can do a conversion from traditional to Roth, and you'll pay some tax on it now. But if you only have 100,000 to convert now, that's, and you pay 15,000 in taxes on it now. That's way better than having 2 million in the future and paying, 15, 20,000 every year. So,
yeah, no, I'll look into
I
that. I did not know.
Yeah. And that's something like, maybe when you do have time and you do look into it, like, let's just connect again on the phone and we'll just talk about it, because it's a little bit complicated. There's some rules you have to be aware of to make sure you don't screw it up. And it's stupid, right? It's like if you make one wrong step and when you're clicking the buttons, the IRS doesn't care it was a mistake. Like they'll just be like, oh, sorry, you clicked the wrong button. Like now you're going to give us taxes on this. So you just have to make sure you do it correctly, and then you can do it for a pretty low tax amount now.
Okay. No, yeah. It sounds like, when you hit that age in retirement, it sounds like a lot of people there's a lot of regret sometimes, they get hit hard because they didn't know, they didn't ask until it was too late, so.
Right.
It's good now. There's towards the end. Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead. No,
it's and this is what I said earlier, right? To give knowledge and to also receive knowledge, right? Because I still have, let's say 5 months left of service. So I was like, this is where, I got to start really making those decisions, what I'm going to do for, 20, 30 years down the road.
Yeah, absolutely. And I forget off the top of my head the title of the book, but if you Google, it's like, just Google, when should I convert my traditional to Roth? There's a guy who wrote a book about it, and he's basically like, under all circumstances, the answer is do the conversion as soon as possible. And they talk about how they have retirees who are 70 years old and they've got like $5 million in their traditional account and they want to convert it into a Roth and they owe like $2 million in taxes. The longer you wait, the more expensive it gets. So it's something to do right away. And also we're in a really unique opportunity for folks in your position who are into real estate and potentially going to have to do a conversion. Is if you invest in real estate, like the new Trump budget bill or whatever brought back the bonus depreciation. So, as you transition out of the military, you could go and buy an investment property and you can depreciate a ton of that value, and it can offset the amount that you convert from your traditional TSP into a Roth, and you could end up getting away with paying zero taxes. So that's just kind of a what do you call it? A hack or a TTP, right? We call it a TTP, that you would do this conversion in the same year you're buying real estate. Or what? I'm sorry.
Okay. A loophole?
Yeah, a loophole, right. So that's something that's really worth considering. And, one last thing about the TSP that I think is worth mentioning, since you brought it up and your wife's not here, it would have been great if she could have made it. But like you said, it was bad timing with her having to go to OTS. So the life cycle funds over time, they slowly move your money more into bonds. And if you look, when you start out, and the fund that they give you, the L fund, it's supposed to correspond to the year of retirement. So if she's in the L 2030, that would mean she's like 55 years old, but I don't think she's 55 years old, right?
No. So is it the 2050?
Yeah, probably something more like that. So
okay.
If you look at it like the 2050, as that fund right now is averaging about 8 or 9% per year returns. But as she gets older and closer to retirement, those average returns are going to go down to 6% and then 5% and eventually down to almost 4%. But you're trying to have the most amount of money possible when you retire. So the best thing for her to do, and again, she's got a lot of runway, right? Is if she just moved it all into the C or the S fund, then she's going to get 10% per year every year. And she'll probably end up with, I've done the math and we don't need to go into it too much, but somebody who's only in the L fund, by the time they hit 62, they're probably going to have about $1.2 million less than somebody who's invested in the C fund. So, this is not investment advice. You make your own decisions, but if you want more money in retirement, don't invest in the life cycle funds.
Yeah. Okay. I'll pass that on to her.
Right. And then you can tell her I said it so she doesn't get mad at you.
Yeah, I mean, and those are the things that we really have to, we have to talk about, because it took me 8 years to move mine from the G fund, to what it's now. If I never would have done that, I mean, it's crazy the amount of money that I would have lost out on. And it just makes me wonder, like, man, what if I did it as a young private? Because I checked in the fleet as a private, so it's like, why didn't I do that as a private? I mean, those years matter, But yeah, I think the Naval Academy, just because we've been there, I think we do a really good job of getting them ready there, in the classroom environment. And, because, I still, I keep in contact with many of the students, and a lot of them are already investing. A lot of them already have their first rental property that they bought at Pensacola, at flight school, that they're there for like 3 years. And, they were investing, they pulled out their loan, their what's it
Mhm.
called? What do they call it? That loan that
Like career starter,
they
career
qualify
kickstarter.
for zero whatever interest. They pulled that out and they invested that money. I'm like, man, that's super smart, So, but yeah, these are the conversations that the young service members have to really, especially the enlisted side, we have to kind of hone in on and put pressure on, so they're not in the same boat as myself, being a sergeant at DI school, working 20 hours a day. And, but when it comes to my financial, structure, there's nothing really there, so, and who knows, what if I would have got out of that 10-year mark? Like, because I really thought
Mhm.
about getting out at my 10-year mark, going law enforcement, going LAPD, CHP. I would have got out with nothing, besides a thank you for your service, So it's pretty nuts.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's, we can just do one more plug for saving your money into the TSP and investing it in the C fund or the S fund, because you get to take it with you when you go. Right. And I've talked to young service members who are like, I don't want to save into that. I'm going to use an IRA. Even at the academy, they're like, I don't want to use TSP because like, I don't think I'm going to stay in for 20 years. And it's like, it doesn't matter. It's
Yeah,
your money. You're going to get it back. And then you've made a really great point also. And like just the example with the Naval Academy about how the young officers and even future officers are getting that kind of mentorship because we surround them with more senior people. And,
absolutely. Yep.
it's a different pace, like, of training. And so you have those opportunities. And so really what we have to do is kind of figure out a way as a community to like reach out and engage with the junior enlisted, and also, empower our NCOs and get them the knowledge too. And that all comes back to probably just something like not packing the schedule so full with useless stuff and just taking some time to do some kneecap to kneecap conversations about like how to take care of yourself, like in a bigger picture.
Yeah. No, 100%.
And that kind of goes into another topic that I want to make sure we hit on what we got you here today, which is, and you mentioned it early on about the survivor's benefit plan and the SBP, right? And so I imagine you've gotten at least like a heads up about that, or have a little bit of understanding. Do you want to explain what that is for the audience?
Oh yeah, it's our department's way is like my father, right? He passed away 3 years ago. The LAPD, he did 39 years. So, my stepmother, she's getting the 50% of, his income, even though I mean, now he's passed, but she's still making it work. The same thing with me. I believe it's 55 of if I were to pass, my wife would be able to still collect my retirement, for her and my family.
Yeah, it's basically like an income insurance plan. And the trade-off is you give up 6.5% of your monthly pension amount, and then that
Correct.
buys you the income insurance. And then if you pass, then your surviving spouse would get 55%. But there's some limitations, right? So first of all, it's only your surviving spouse. So if your spouse dies before you, there's exactly zero benefit, and you've just been paying off all those years, 6.5%. And the other thing too is like, you can't have it directed to, say, like a surviving child, right? So I'm curious if you have thought about some other options than the SBP, if you've thought about like life insurance or any other kind of like things that you could invest in that could kind of have the same function.
On that, I have not. I know my wife, that we had this conversation because like her job also, at the hospital, they offer something like that. I think we kind of we said no to it, but no, we have not really, besides, man, this was when our children were very small. I forgot. I mean, my wife knows majority of it, but our two kids have something with like New York Life. I don't know exactly what it is. All I know is we paid $35. We've been paying $35 for each child for the past like 15 years. But no, I have not really looked into like a secondary, benefits plan if, something were to happen to me and my spouse.
Okay. Well, I want to use this opportunity to just kind of like share a different strategy. And I think it's great that what you're doing for the kids, like every person should have life insurance. And one of the things that I find kind of strange about the survivor's benefit plan is it could be good for your spouse, right? I mean, I'm sure they don't want you to die, but if your spouse dies, like what does that do for you? And so just kind of crunching the numbers, if you are to, I'm just kind of looking at my screen here because I did some of the math, but I did like an E9 or an O5 who opted into the survivor's benefit program, and they are paying, their premiums are going to be about $250 a month that they're paying. And let's say they pay that in for like 30 years, right? Because you retire, you're right around 40. Let's say you die a little bit young, right around 70. You've been paying that in for 30 years. You're going to get, and then let's say your spouse lives for 5 years longer than you. The net benefit to your spouse is going to be about $50,000, right? They'll get about an extra $100,000, but it cost you about an extra $50,000 to get that. So the SBP is worth about $50,000. But if you took $250 a month and you invested it for the next 30 years, you would have a brokerage account with over $600,000 in it. Or you could buy a life insurance, a 30-year life insurance policy with $1 million payout, right? And you can get that probably for like $100 a month, $120 a month, something like that. So, and the thing about the life insurance is you could take your $250 that you would be spending on an SBP premium, and you could buy $1 million policy on yourself to take care of your spouse if you die first, and you could buy $1 million policy on your spouse, so you would be taken care of if they pass first. So and then the other reason why I try to encourage that is because you can also name your children as additional beneficiaries. If for whatever reason, everybody can get a piece of the pie in that case, and you can take care of the whole family. So that,
Okay.
I have a blog post on that, and I'll send you a link to that after this episode, and I'll link it in the show notes for anybody who's listening, so they can read it and look at the numbers. Because, like you said earlier, you gotta show it to me to believe it, and the numbers kind of speak for themselves. And full disclosure, that whole blog post was something that was created essentially when I was asked by the IPAC, by the admin shop, like, are you going to sign SBP or are you going to decline it? And I did the math, and then I went to my wife and I was like, look, if you just let me take this money and invest it, it'll be worth more. And she's like, okay, fine, I'll sign it. Like, we don't have to do it. But I would personally trade, I personally rather have $600,000 or $1 million than $100,000 any day.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, we'll have this conversation again.
Yeah, but I do want to get your feedback on that blog post too, because sometimes the numbers get a little bit chewy, right? Like if you get too much into the math, like you can kind of lose your audience. And so I'll be eager to get your feedback, because so far there's no comments on it. So it's either really convincing or it's too confusing.
Okay, I'll listen to it. Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Well, I appreciate that. And the whole like life insurance thing too, is that anything that you've thought about? Because right now you're still covered by SGLI and probably TSGLI.
Correct.
But have you purchased additional life insurance for yourself or your wife?
No, I haven't thought about that far. I've been fully, kind of engaged in what I'm doing now. And there's many things that I still need to do. I need to do that. The older I get, the more I realize that we do have a few things that, what if something were to happen, is like a living trust, right? Like it's having something where worst case scenario, our children are not getting, taxed, because we do have 3 homes, we do have all these things that they will be put in a very best spot, when it comes to, paying Uncle Sam, because we haven't taken the initiative to go out there and get a professional, put everything in a living trust and, doing all those things. But no, I have, when it comes to the question, I have not, even thought about the life insurance, once I retire.
Well, I'm really glad you brought up the trust and the will as well, because if I'm thinking correctly and recalling correctly about, my military career, and you can kind of tell me if I'm right or wrong here, but The only time that they ever talk to us about like doing a will and trust is like before we're about to deploy to combat. And they're like, hey, you should do this. And we're like, what?
And it's generic.
Why? What's going to happen?
It's already there. Yeah. It's already, I mean, but it's not really a rule. I don't even look at it as a real, a will, because it's just it's a template. You put a few things in there. I remember my first will going to Iraq. I think, like, again, being 19 years old, I want to be buried in my dress blues with my Dodger hat. That was it, And I signed, and boom, that's all my family would have had. Hey, this knucklehead wants to be buried in his dress blues with his Dodger hat. But no, yeah, it's no one really does it. My father, he passed away, the smartest man I know. So many investments and so many things that he did in his 39 years in LAPD, never had a will. And now we're doing that whole probate, and it's a mess.
Is that still going on?
So it is still going on.
Wow.
He passed away in
for
March
everybody listening, that's like
March.
3 years.
Yeah. So
I'm sorry.
That's what me and my wife, when she comes back, is like, we need to really stop putting it off to tomorrow, because you just never know. I never thought he was going to pass. He was the one I thought he was going to be, 90, 100 years old. But you just never know. So it's like, we have to do it, like, I'm speaking for myself, but like, we just put it in the bag, hey, we'll wait. You just never know when it's too late.
Yeah, you never know. And the thing is these are things that are not on the TRS, transition readiness checklist to do, but buying additional life insurance and using the base legal. My wife and I made sure that before I retired that we use the base legal to draft our legal documents, because it's free. And the lawyers were fantastic, right? Because it's not just a simple, when you get to that point, you can say, I also want a health directive. I want a living will. They will do it all for you for free. And so to anybody who's getting ready to transition, you don't even have to be retiring. You can be getting out after like 5 years or 8 years. Go to Base Legal and have them draft up your legal documents for free. It's a no-brainer, but again, TRS is not going to tell you to go do that.
Yeah. And that's their job. What else are they doing there at the JAG office?
Right.
And no, they're dealing with a bunch of shenanigans too. But yeah, no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, yeah. But it's important, like what you're saying is, like, we're not here just to badmouth anybody and say that they're like deliberately misleading anybody or not doing their jobs. There's a checklist given to them, and there's a lot on it. And if you haven't like sat down and thought about other things, then you're not going to do it. So that's why we're here, and that's why we're having this conversation, is we're finding out different things to think about. You've got about 8 months. Like your EAS is the date that actually counts. So you can save some of these things to do until you're on terminal leave, but you can't wait until after you're out. But you have a pretty good checklist, I think, so far, which is you're probably going to want to, if you don't have an IRA, you're probably going to open an IRA. You're going to look at making a rollover conversion to get some of your money out of your TSP and put it into a different retirement account. You're going to have that conversation about the survivor's benefit plan. You're going to take a look at life insurance. You're going to take a look at your will and trust and a living trust. Are there any things that we're missing right now that you're thinking about or you have questions about? Because, I want to respect our timeline and we need to kind of wrap things up. But what do we miss? That we haven't even talked about college, right? But maybe that's a whole nother episode.
Oh man, no, there's so many benefits. The military. When people ask like, hey, should my son join? And I always lead off with the reality that we are here for a reason. The past few years has been kind of peacetime Marine Corps. I reminded my mom, she's the Navy midshipman mom, and she's super proud. She's always posting pictures of my little brother, prestigious, the Naval Academy. And it's like, time out, you never know. I mean, something can happen and boom, your precious midshipman is going to be in the front lines in a submarine or in the Marine Corps, something like that. But, on the positive side, the military does provide so many tools and so many resources and opportunities that no one else gets. That's what has led me to, where I'm at now. Another smart decision I made was like, maybe it was when I was in Okinawa, Japan, I re-enlisted. The year had to be like 2017, 18, but I transferred my GI Bill to my family. I gave them each a certain percentage, and you can always go back on Mill Connect and kind of fluctuate the numbers. My daughter's at the University of Hawaii at Manoa, fully paid for books, and she's living in an apartment that's contracted by the university, and that apartment is $1,000 a month, and we got a letter from from the VA of what they're going to pay us out monthly, and it's $3,500 a month, and
Wow.
it is nuts, I'm like, I'm telling my wife, I'm like, man, this is like a full ride. It's better than a full ride to college. Who else gets those opportunities? But I was smart enough to transfer when I reenlisted. So I think that's the caveat to that, right? You got to reenlist and you got to transfer it. I think after 8 years, that's when you are entitled to it. But my kid is going to school for absolutely free, and they're paying us. So that's another $3,500 coming in. That's another pocket of money. And it's crazy. Not many people, get that opportunity besides like midshipmen who are going to the service academies, or like my daughter's boyfriend who is the quarterback for BYU, where it's full ride. It's everything's paid for. So those are the little things that I do preach about the military, about like just how many awesome benefits that we have for serving. And it hasn't been easy. I've been in for 18 years, and I've had a lot of, tough times in the Marine Corps. My body sometimes it feels like it's broken, but I think I've did good in, getting back, not what is owed to me, but I took advantage of those opportunities.
Yeah, of course. And I think a way that I put it is like you earn it, right? Like it's the right way to treat your people for doing what they do while they're in uniform, is to offer these other benefits to make it worth their while, because like the paycheck's not like nobody's sitting here earning like CEO money, but in the long run, the benefits really add up. Before we wrap things up, there's one question I just remembered I wanted to ask you, and that
Absolutely.
is looking at the mortgages you have on the rentals. So these are pretty well paid down, pretty low monthly payments, and you've got a lot of equity in those houses. I assume you've also got like some of your VA loan eligibility tied up in some of those properties. And so I'm curious if you've thought about doing like a refinance or a cash out refinance, either to get your VA eligibility back to full eligibility so you could use it again, or to pull some of the equity out, turn it into cash you can use for more investments.
Okay. No. Great question. So we have our 2 rental properties, and then we have our home now. Beautiful home. When we bought this one, we didn't even come to California to look at it. We bought it all through kind of photos, and I did all the, Google Earth, and I had one of my really good friends who's a real estate agent down here. He was the one that was in here with the phone, and I did my due diligence on buying this home, but we bought it without ever stepping foot into it. But I did the numbers. This home, we bought it for what, $670. But when I looked at the history of the home, back in 2021, this home hit, the highest of a, and you gotta do the numbers between Zillow and, what's it called, Redfin, and, all these, at some point it did hit the 826 mark, so I always thought like, all right, one day it has the potential to be back there, and that was a really big deciding factor of why I bought this house. Fast forward now 2 years. Yeah, I really think if I were to put this house in the market, it could be anywhere from, the 790 to the 850, mark. We've done a lot of work, to it as well, but we are tied with our VA loan. The one in Idaho, the one in California, the one in Murrieta, our first rental property, that's a conventional loan. We refinanced that home. I forgot. I think it was like 2019, 2020. We refinanced into a conventional loan. That's why we got our eligibility back. My wife, we used hers for the one in Idaho. So when the time came, we had the VA loan for this home. But now we're looking at, again, the next chapter in life. Where do we want to absolutely settle down? And there's no complaints for this home, but I've always wanted acreage. I want to live a little bit, still be within distance of like homes, not in the boondocks. But right now we're looking at a home down like in Temecula, like the wine country region. And so we have been looking for the past year, for the perfect home. So we are thinking about like what is the best, what's the way plan, what's the way forward? Do we sell this home because we're gonna have to get that VA entitlement back? So it's like, do we do the same thing we did to the first house, or do we sell this one to clear it up? There's a lot of questions there. But we do want to buy another home, and we're just trying to, and that's what it is asking the questions of how do we, how do we get more bang for the buck? What makes more sense? Because I know this home, we cannot rent it for, well, like for the gain that the other ones have. There's no way possible, So that's there. But everything comes with knowledge. If I would have known a lot of these things, I would have had the house in Annapolis. I would have done a HELOC. I would have done something. I didn't know. Back then I just didn't think at the time to refinance the house in Idaho. Get that VA loan kind of cleared up, even potentially pull out some equity and put it into the one in Annapolis. We didn't do that, So now it's going to the drawing board. It's like, all right, so how can we get the next home, and which house are we going to clear up? So we're not thinking of this home, but we're really kind of deciding maybe it is time to shut the door to the home in Idaho. So once we shut that door in Idaho, we will get my wife's entitlement back, based on our income and all that. And then I believe if we sell a home, and if we kind of convert that money and put it into a new home within, what is it, like 6 months, then you won't get taxed on the capital gains. I believe, I forgot what that was called.
Yeah. So the first thing I want to say is, with the VA, I think this changed actually in January of 2024, but it's only really becoming like common knowledge now. Well, it's not even common knowledge now. It's like the lenders and agents are just figuring it out. But the VA, up until January of 2024, there was a maximum amount of VA eligibility based on zip code. So like in Southern California, it would be like 1.3 million. That's gone. If you have full entitlement, you can use a VA loan to buy a $3 million house. And so I think the strategy you would want to, what's that?
Depending on your income, right? Like if you qualify and all that.
Right. Yeah, you still have to qualify. But so this is a great thing to do, right? Because like if you have a little bit of VA entitlement that is used up on the Idaho home for your wife's entitlement, you could refinance out of that right now while you're still on active duty, restore her full entitlement. And then she could be that sort of primary borrower and go to a loan officer. They do the maximum mortgage worksheet. They find out, oh, yes, you have your full entitlement. You're eligible for all of this. And then next year, while you still have like your max tax returns from your W-2 income from the military, that's probably if you don't just go out and get a new job straight away, that's probably going to be your best opportunity to qualify for a new loan. Because like once you go into retirement, they're not going to count like your VA disability income, which is a big chunk. And so your actual income can look like it's going down, even if it doesn't. And so you could kind of like do that kind of timing. That could be like mission 2026 is like refi and go buy or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
To answer your question, so what Chris was talking about was selling an investment property and the 1031 exchange. It's called a like-kind exchange. And what that says is if you have an investment property and you sell it and then you go buy another like-kind, so that means you sell a house, you go buy another house. You sell an apartment building, you go buy another apartment building. With the proceeds from that sale, you don't have to pay the capital gains tax on it. But it's deferred. It doesn't go away. It's just deferred until either you finally sell or you die. And so the real strategy is you die, because once you die, it goes to zero. Well, it goes to zero, and then your kids don't have to pay any tax, right? So that's like your best strategy with that. But there is one other thing that you could consider, and that is, are you familiar with the Section 121 exclusion on capital gains on selling a primary home?
You're testing me. Let me see. Is that the one, selling your primary home? Is that the one where if the capital gains is more than $250,000 and you held it longer than 2 years, you get taxed a certain amount of money instead of, or am I?
You got some of the numbers right. But so what it says is a single person who sells their primary home, so the one you lived in, if you live in it for any 24 months out of the last 5 years, it doesn't have to be 2 years in a row, just 24 months in the last 5 years, a single person does not owe tax capital gain tax on $250,000 worth of profit, and a married couple does not owe tax on $500,000 of profit.
Yep. So I was close.
That's a big deal. You're close.
Yep, it is.
But here's one thing that not many people know. And like, I did not know about this until a couple months ago. And I cracked open the tax code and I was reading about it. If you are in the military, you can use up to 10 years of your time on active duty to defer that benefit. So that means if you lived in that California home in 2011 and 2012 for 24 months, it's actually 24 months out of the last 15 years. So you have an opportunity with that, right? It's another one of those benefits that only the military gets and like can't be touched, is you can literally buy a house at the beginning of your career, live in it for 2 years, and then when you retire, you can sell it and pay essentially like zero tax on the capital gains. So that might complicate the decision about what to do with the properties, but
yeah. And that's because I think it's been a while, but I did think of that, right? Because our first home, right? Our first home, that was the one that has the most equity, the most value, right? So it and we moved from that home in 2016. So prior to that, we did live in it for 6 years. We're at that window now where it's like at that, you said the 15 years, and it's shutting on us a little bit, but it's a good problem to have. We have multiple where, it's just what makes the most sense, and it's hard. Could we sell all three of them and kind of buy our dream home? We probably could, but is that the smart thing to do? And that's why I keep coming back to you and asking you those things, because it sounds like a great idea, right? We've done some good decision making. Now we can pretty much sell and buy our dream home cash. Is it doable? But what's the negative in that? We lose our passive income. We could probably get taxed more. There's a lot of stuff that goes into it. It's not as easy as that.
Yeah. Right. It's not easy. And I think it's a good way to like kind of sum things up here, is that it's all really complicated. The value we're trying to add is by talking about these things. And, I probably will say this more than once, like, on wrapping up the show, but if for anybody listening who felt like they learned something today, found something valuable, share it with somebody else who's going to have the same, or maybe you've had the conversations with them. Like, we're just going to organically like grow the circle and bring more people in. If there's value in this episode, share it. And like, eventually you'll go back and listen to other episodes when we talk about the VA loan, we talk about budgeting, we talk about emergency savings, talk about real estate investing. And over time, you're just going to be able to build up all that knowledge that guys like Chris and I have spent 20 plus years kind of figuring out by hustling and, by reading my book and following this community and listening to the podcast. You can start to soak up all that knowledge in like a few months, not a few decades. Right. So
absolutely,
Chris, it's been absolutely amazing to have you. These are reminding me of some of the best conversations I had in my career, when you and I were driving around Southern California in the Govey rental pickup truck and just talking about real estate and what we're going to do. Like, we're just continuing on. It's been 5+ years now of these kind of conversations. So I'm really grateful that you took the time to be here and you shared everything that you did share. And I want to wrap the show up by just giving you the opportunity to, one final piece of advice, words of wisdom that you would like to leave the audience with before we go.
Oh, awesome. Hey, sir, Ted, thank you for having me. I love talking to you. I think I told you all the time, you're one of the mentors, and that's one reason why I say that the Academy was my favorite tour, just because I was surrounded by such influential individuals that, I can just rely on, for the rest of my life when it comes to certain situations. But yeah, to everyone out there, good luck in your service, and, don't ever forget about yourself. I know everyone has a career, and the military is so easy to, make, forcing you to kind of just live, breathe, and eat the Navy, Marine Corps, Army, whatever service you're in, but take the little time to do something for you. What I mean by that is, if you have a hobby, right, it's never too late to pick up a book of what you want to do. So, for the past year and a half, I've been reading books where it has built, it's not only a passion, but it has driven me to where I'm at now. So it's like, I'm super excited to start my business that I already have rolling, and I know once I transition, it's going to open, So I took some time for myself, and instead of being forced to read the Commandant's reading list, which I do read books about leadership and certain kind of wars and stuff like that. But I took the time for me and I started reading about what I wanted to do when I retire. And that has completely changed my outlook because at the end of the day, you're gonna do your time, and you're gonna have to do something else. The military is not forever, So hold that pride, but don't forget to take care of your future and your families. So, but thank you again for having me, and happy birthday, Marines. Semper Fi.
Yeah, happy birthday and Semper Fi to you too, Chris. Great parting wisdom, and thanks to everybody for tuning in this week. We'll be getting this uploaded soon, so you won't be listening to it exactly on the birthday, but every day is a good day to celebrate the Marine Corps birthday.
All right.
Thank you for spending time with me today. I know how busy life is in and around the military, and I don't take your attention or your time for granted. It really means a lot to me that you're here, and that's why I pour so much of myself into each episode to make sure it's worth your time. If today's episode helped you, here's your challenge. Share it with a teammate, battle buddy, spouse, friend, partner, or someone in your family who could use this information. Together, we're growing a stronger, smarter, and wealthier military community, one listener at a time. For more resources, tools, or to sign up for a free coaching session, head over to www.militarywealthcoach.com. And you can also find us on LinkedIn and Facebook by just searching for Military Wealth Coach. Follow us on Instagram and X at MWC112358. Our groundbreaking book, Service and Wealth, 12 Proven Money Habits to Master Military Finance, has just been revised and expanded for 2025, and it's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon right now. And stay tuned for our upcoming release of our next book, The Ultimate Military Retirement Plan, Your Standard Operating Procedure to Financial Freedom. Hey, until next time, stay financially fit and mission ready.